Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Nishcast. I'm the Diggly Doodah Doc, the Papatoy Panther with the Mr. Slippers, here to talk through Aotearoa Warriors Rugby League and also Reserve Grade Warriors, Jersey Flegg Warriors and Kiwi NRL matters as well. We're coming at you to preview Warriors versus Raiders on the Friday night first and foremost, and then we'll slide into those other topics. Support the Niche Cache and the Niche Cast as best you can. We do have a Patreon page. We are dishing up a podcast just for our patrons, and we're sorting out a few things there. So jump on Patreon. It's the best way to support the Niche Cache and the Niche Cast. Otherwise, just like, subscribe, rate, review, all that normal stuff that you hear everywhere. And yeah, we just appreciate you listening to us jibber jabber about Kiwi sporting matters. That's all we're here to do. Just chat some shit about sports. Warriors versus Raiders at Mount Smart Stadium, Friday night, 8 p.m. kickoff, and the Raiders are currently in 4th. The Raiders are bloody good. Let me just tell you that. The Raiders are a good footy team, and the Warriors, as we have seen time and time again this season, appear to be a limited footy team, and that's not a good sign coming into this game. We also, I think Isaac Luke is out suspended, so there'll be some changes there. Carl Lawton was named on the reserves list, so he's the likeliest option. I can't really see Chanel Harris-Tavita or Adam Kieran starting at dummy half. Like, they're good job doers, but you definitely of the belief that you need half specific players to play at dummy half and not job doing role players. Like, you need someone who knows and understands the dummy half position pretty well. So hopefully Carl Lawton is good to go to replace Isaac Luke. The Warriors still have Blake Ashford in the centres, still got Gerard Bell on the wing, Kema Malo does come back, and then you still have Adam Blair, Isaiah Papali'i on the edges, Jazz Tavanga starting in the middle, Lachlan Burr, Sam Lasone, Bunty Afoa and Chanel Harris-Tavita on the bench, and do expect some late changes there just with the whole Isaac Luke situation as well. Interesting here to see that Josh Curran has made his way into the extended bench for the Warriors. Now, that is somewhat notable considering that Josh Curran was a late arrival at the Warriors. He came midway through this season from the Roosters. He was part of the Roosters system, and I've talked about signing Josh Curran, signing Jackson Frey, signing Adam Pompey from the Roosters, and now Josh Curran, has jumped into the NRL squad, and he's done so ahead of guys like Chris Sate, ahead of guys like Lingi Sao, ahead of guys like Levaha Pulu. So obviously Josh Curran is doing something pretty good for the Warriors and impressing Stephen Kearney, which is a bit weird because Josh Curran played 58 minutes off the bench last week. He might have played somewhere else though. No. Yeah, he played 58 minutes off the bench last week in the Warriors' win over the Eels reserve grade team, and Josh Curran only had 11 runs for 83 metres, which you compare that to Jackson Frey. Jackson Frey had 15 runs, 130 metres. Chris Sate had 19 runs for 256 metres. So, and then you have also Adam Tuamavave Gerard. He had 11 runs for 118 metres, so he's a beast as well. So I don't really know what Josh Curran has done to wiggle ahead of a lot of other Warriors forwards who are going about their business in reserve grade, but Josh Curran is obviously impressing Stephen Kearney, and he's just gone straight onto the extended bench. In terms of how I see this game playing out, it's difficult to envision a Warriors victory here. They do have Cody Nikorima coming back as well, I think, and that's going to be a huge addition just with his playmaking ability on the left edge. mainly his speed. I think that's his greatest asset, and he's a bit faster than Chanel Harris-Tavita, so that should help. But the Raiders kind of feel just like a better team, and not just a better team, but a team that knows how they operate, knows what they're all about, and they know that what they do in 2019 can be successful in the NRL. Compare that to the Warriors, who don't have an identity, they don't have a style to play, and as results would suggest, the Warriors don't have that confidence in what they're doing that the Raiders have. Most footy games you have to dominate the middle of the field, and the Raiders forward pack is up there with the best in the business. Like Josh Papali is, I reckon he's one of the most underrated forwards in the NRL. It's hard to say that someone who plays Origin footy and should really be playing Test footy for Australia, but happy days if he wants to play for Samoa, all good. But regardless, Josh Papali is an Origin international caliber player, so it's hard to say he's underrated, but I think he is underrated because no one talks about him as one of the best props in the game, and that's kind of what he is. Like, he's just a ruthless middle forward. He's got footwork, he's mobile, he's chunky, he's hard to bring down, and chuck in Iosio Soliola, who is fantastic for the Raiders. Joseph Tarpany is also pretty damn good. Josh Hodgson is pulling the strings. And I just don't see how the Warriors can do enough in the middle of the park to then enjoy the fruits of their labour. And that's amplified when you also consider that the edge combination, so Adam Blair on one edge and Isaiah Papali'i on the other edge, is just doing nothing really. Like, I'm sympathetic for Adam Blair, and he is what he is. He does a decent job. He's got offloads. He's got good hands. He's a bit, and he's got the size that Isaiah Papali'i doesn't have. Like, Isaiah Papali'i at the moment, he just feels like a bit of a nothing player out there on the edge. Like, he's not overly big. He's not fast. We all know how strong Isaiah Papali'i is, and he plays with a certain effort and intensity that is admirable. But, you know, you're coming up against John Bateman. You're coming up against Elliot Whitehead. That's as good as edge forward duo as any other team in the NRL, especially the inclusion of John Bateman. And I'm just very interested to see whether Adam Blair and Isaiah Papali'i can have an impact on this game, considering who their opponents are. Like, last week, they were a bit ho-hum. They've been a bit ho-hum for a while. I've been just watching Isaiah Papali'i steadily over the course of the season. I don't really see a whole lot of progression in his game in the same way that we have seen guys like Bunty Afoa and Ken Mamalo develop over time. Isaiah Papali'i seems to have hit a bit of a plateau, and neither of them are crucial to the Warriors' performance this week against the Raiders, but I'm just interested to see what they do offer, because it's been a rough couple of weeks and they need to start adding a bit more to their game when the ball does come to them out on the edges. Now, if the Warriors are to win this game against the Raiders, it's gonna have to be the epitome of what I see as like the how the Warriors best play their footy that we haven't seen all season. So I don't expect this to happen. I'm just saying, for the Warriors to win, they have to control the game and they have to keep the Raiders coming off their own try line. But then the Raiders have put a lot of effort into sorting out their defensive patterns, and this year they are a far better defensive team than they have been previously. I'm just going to try and pull up some team stats here and see where the Raiders are ranked. They are 10th in total number of missed tackles, so that's okay. It's not anything overly exceptional. We'll just pull up the ladder here and just see what their points against is. They've conceded 266 points against, which is second best to the Melbourne Storm. So that tells you all you need to know about the Canberra Raiders defensively, is that they are second. They're the second best defensive team, only conceding 266. They're fourth on the ladder, but the Rabbitohs in second and Roosters in third have both conceded more points than the Raiders this season, but the Raiders haven't scored more points than the teams that are ahead of them. So how that applies to the Warriors playing their footy, the Warriors have to do things with the footy to try and break down this Raiders team. It's not a case of just showing up with your structured plays. When you're coming up against good defensive teams, as we've seen the Warriors do so against the Melbourne Storm, the Warriors tend to have a decent, not great, but decent record against the Melbourne Storm, and that's because against the defensive teams with a certain level of defensive prowess, you need to offer something weird and different in attack and how you go about your business, because those teams are good defensive teams because they shut down the structured plays of their opposition. They do all their homework, they spend the week preparing, and they can identify playmakers in structured plays and then shut it down. That doesn't quite work so well when you're dealing with the unpredictable. That's partly why the Warriors have been successful in the past with the footy, but we've seen that fade away as Stephen Kearney has had more and more influence at the Warriors, and I think the Warriors, they're not going to be able to grind with the Canberra Raiders. That's not going to happen, and they're not going to be able to continually turn the ball over to the Raiders and then stop the Raiders scoring points. The Warriors aren't going to out-defend the Canberra Raiders. The Warriors need to just be able to, and I'm not saying go all in on their unstructured, razzle-dazzle, funky footy type of work, but they need to control the game and get themselves in the right areas of the field. And while I don't think they will win the set-for-set grind against the Canberra Raiders if they go 80 minutes in that style of footy, they do need to engage the Raiders in that plan of going set-for-set, kick to the corners, keep turning the ball over down the Raiders' end, and then when opportunities present themselves to throw the footy around and move the Raiders defensively around, that's when the Warriors could have some success. Again, I'm not overly confident that is how it's going to play out, so we just got to wait and see what the Warriors are up to. In terms of what this game means for the Warriors, they are currently sitting in 12th position on the ladder. They have 17 points, and they probably need to start winning some games. They have a very difficult run into the finals, and I'm just going to see if they have what their home schedule is like. They host the Raiders, and then they host the Seagulls before going away to the Roosters, going away to the Sharks, hosting the Rabbitohs, and then away to the Raiders. So if the Warriors are to make any sort of waves and possibly crack the top 8, they need to win at least one of these games over the next 2 weeks at Mount Smart Stadium. Unfortunately, those two games are coming up against teams who are better than the Warriors, and that starts this week. Getting a win against the Raiders at home is going to ease the pressure a whole lot on the rest of their kind of 5 or 6 games left, 6 games remaining. And more importantly, like we've seen every year, it's the same story. The Warriors are either competing to get into the top 8 and they fall short, or they do sneak into the top 8, and because they're not a great team, they lose in the finals early in the finals process. So it's one thing for me to talk about what the Warriors need to do to get into the top 8, but they need to carry some momentum. They need to quickly figure a few things out, most notably how they, like their identity and their vibe and their structure and their style of footy and what they hang their hat on, which is very late in the season to do so, but you need to come into the finals with some momentum behind you. And for the Warriors, if they stutter into the finals, that's going to be about as useful as not making the finals. So they need to get wins, they need to generate some buzz, generate some momentum, generate some hype around them, get the confidence flowing, and that starts against Canberra Raiders, which is an unlikely prediction. I don't think the Warriors are going to win. Warriors reserve grade team, they then host Mounties, which is the feeder club to the Raiders. Adam Pompey's back at fullback in reserve grade. You have Hayes Perham and Adam Kieran are in the halves. Tane Milne's back at centre, which is good to see he's not on an edge because Josh Curran is on an edge. This reserve grade forward pack's pretty damn impressive if you ask me. Chris Sarte, Carl Lawton is named in reserve grade, but I doubt he'll play. Jackson Frey starting in the middle. Josh Curran, Levaha Pulu's on an edge, and then Lingy Sowers in the middle. On the bench, you got Philip Makatoa, Adam Tuamavave, Gerard King, Vuniyayawa, and Sean Mullaney. So I would kind of expect for Tyler Slade to come into the reserve grade picture. I'll touch on the Jersey Flegg Warriors in a second. And Philip Makatoa is also there. He's Jersey Flegg eligible, and he's keeping two kind of certified reserve graders out of that team, and Clayton Williams and Preston Rickey, who have both spent much of this season playing reserve grade footy. And then now Philip Makatoa has slid in to be named. Of course, as always, there will be late changes to these teams, but Philip Makatoa is obviously doing a good job, and I do like Philip Makatoa as a prospect, as a forwards prospect for the Warriors. So it's good to see him enjoying a bit of love from Coach Nathan Kalis, their reserve grade coach. And obviously, Josh Curran starting on an edge with Tane Milne at centre. Tane Milne has been playing a lot of edge footy for the Warriors this season, but Josh Curran is starting on an edge this week for the Warriors, and just interesting to see what he can do, having been named on that extended bench for the reserve grade Warriors, and how hungry, how determined he is to make an NRL debut. Not an NRL debut, I think he debuted for the Roosters, but to crack this Warriors NRL team in these last few weeks, because obviously Chris Sarte, Levaha Polu and Lingy Sao are out of favour at the Warriors. So Josh Curran has a little opening just to see what he can do in these last few weeks, and whether he has the ability and the mental ability to crack into the Warriors NRL team. Jersey Flegg Warriors are hosting the Canberra Raiders also at North Harbour Stadium. So both those games are at North Harbour Stadium. And the Jersey Flegg Warriors have Adam Emmanuel Tuamavave Gerard at fullback, Celestino Ravatamata, who scored 4 tries last week, he's on the wing, as well as Edward Kossi, KL Iro and Casey Smith are your centres, Paul Turner, Sione Moala are your halves. Junior Poor, Wesley Vaikoso and Tyler Slade are named in the middle. As I said, Tyler Slade's probably going to go up to reserve grade, and that will result in Jairus Glamozina most likely coming into the team. Temple Kalepo is starting at hooker. Brody Tamarua and Tom Ale are your edge forwards. Then we have Taniela Otakulo, Lesa Katoa, Isaiah Wagner, Tony Tupanuia on the bench with Jairus Glamozina as the 18th man. And they are coming up against the Canberra Raiders Jersey Flegg. So we'll just see what's happening in the Jersey Flegg ladder and what this Canberra Raiders Flegg team has been up to this season, and whether the Warriors are favourites or not. The Raiders are 7th, the Warriors are 8th, so it's a little grudge match here on the fringes of the top 8 for the Warriors Jersey Flegg team. And I still think this Jersey Flegg Warriors team is very, very talented. I think they are full of NRL prospects, and based on what we've seen from the Jersey Flegg Warriors recently, considering they are 3-2 over the last 5 games. At home, they are 3-3, which isn't a great record, but I just like the Jersey Flegg Warriors, and I will be interested to see what they can do against the Canberra Raiders. And of course, any other changes I'll touch on after that game, when the team list from that game has been confirmed, and we'll see who came in last minute and who dropped out. Now, in terms of Kiwi NRL Funk, we roll through these games. So tonight, Thursday night, you've got Tigers versus Cowboys. Tigers have Esan Masters at centre, Benji Marshall in the halves, Josh Alawai starting in the middle. Michael Cheekham has made a pretty damn impressive recovery to start on an edge. And then you have Jason Tamalolo starting in the middle for the Cowboys. And as I touched on last week, Murray Taulangi, he is from Auckland, Otahu Rugby Junior, but he has been playing Queensland under 18s and under 20s. So just still interested to see where Murray Taulangi's future sits. Sorry, my words are all over the show today. Raiders versus Warriors. Raiders have Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad returning to Auckland. Bailey Simonson, Jordan Rapana, Iosia Soliola, and Joseph Tapine is also in the middle with Soliola. Then Saliva Havili is coming off the bench, most likely as a middle forward, as he tends to do. Broncos versus Storm. Alex Glenn is again at centre with Jermaine Isako on the wing. Jermaine Isako's had a nice little resurgence. It became known that his father had recently fell victim. Well, and he's not fallen victim yet. He's still fighting, but he's battling cancer at the moment. So that's why Jermaine Isako missed a few games. But he's come back really strong, which is great to see. And that's it for the Broncos. Storm have Jerome Hughes at fullback. They also have Jesse Bromwich and Nelson Asafa-Solomona in the middle, with Kenny Bromwich out on an edge, and Brandon Smith is coming off the bench there. That's a big game for the Broncos to test themselves against the Melbourne Storm, but I'm always interested in this Melbourne Storm forward pack, and even more so coming up against the likes of Matt Lodge, Payne Haas, Tom Flegler looks like a good forward, David Fafita, Matt Gillette. This forward pack is beastly, Joe Ofahengawe, but the Melbourne Storm forward pack is the best in the league. And that's because of Jesse Bromwich and Nelson Asafa-Solomona, Kenny Bromwich, these Kiwi NRL forwards, and I suspect they will be eager to stamp their authority against that younger Broncos forward pack. Manly Seagulls versus Newcastle Knights. Seagulls have the standard Whenua Blake, Manasi Whanu, Martin Tapau crew, and Taniela Paseka he's also from Auckland, and I expect Taniela Paseka to go down the Tongan route and add his weight to an almighty Tongan forward pack. The Knights. Now, what's happened with the Knights is Herman Ese and Danny Levi have dropped out, and Danny Levi's absence allows Mason Lino to come into the halves because Connor Watson has gone into hooker. Now, I definitely wouldn't have thought that Mason Lino would be starting in the halves in a Knights team that also has Callum Ponga, Mitchell Pearce and Connor Watson, because if the Knights are at full strength, I just couldn't see where Mason Lino fit in. But Mason Lino has done a job at every opportunity that he's had in the NRL with the Knights, and this has coincided with Danny Levi and the Knights having a bit of a rough patch. And so Mason Lino starts alongside Mitchell Pearce, alongside Connor Watson, alongside Callum Ponga. So it's an exciting opportunity for Mason Lino in the halves for the Knights. Sean Kennedale's on a wing. James Gavay has survived the cut, and he's still on the bench. Interestingly, the Knights have also named Jura Momosia on the extended bench. Jura Momosia was a bit of a prodigy at St. Paul's College. He played first 15 rugby at St. Paul's, which is a interesting choice considering St. Paul's is routinely known as one of the best rugby league schools in Aotearoa. And then he did dabble in rugby league at St. Paul's, and he got picked up. I think he initially got picked up by the Storm, but he's been starting in the middle for the Knights reserve grade this year, and he has worked his way onto the extended bench for the Knights, which is great to see. And the Knights are apparently in a bit of a salary cap pickle that is most likely going to see Herman Ese depart. And when you're in a salary cap pickle, you promote your youngsters because they are obviously on smaller contracts, and I think the whole Knights situation is going to fall in favour of Jura Momosia, and we are going to see him crack NRL footy. I still think he could crack it this year. 6 games to go. If not this season, definitely next season. Bulldogs versus Panthers. Bulldogs have Waitane-Zelezniak at fullback, Remus Smith on the wing, Corey Harawira-Naera is on an edge, Jeremy Marshall-King, Renouf Tu'umanga coming off the bench, and then you have Raymond Faitala-Mariner and Ofahiki Ogden on the extended bench. Panthers, they have Dean Whare at centre, James Fisher-Harris in the middle, and then you have Jerome Luai and Moses Leota on the bench. Again, you've got Jerome Luai and you also have Wade Egan. So Jerome Luai and Wade Egan are both that kind of utility playmaker position. So it'll be interesting to see where and how Jerome Luai is used. And this game has Corey Harawira-Naera coming up against his former club and also James Fisher-Harris, two Northland products coming up against each other. So it'll be interesting to see their little battle. And I'm continuously impressed by Bulldogs winger Remus Smith, and I still maintain that there is a high chance Remus Smith may crack the Kiwis squad later on this year. Sharks versus Rabbitohs. Sharks have Sasai Feki, Sean Johnson, Britton Nakora starting on an edge, and then you have Braden Hamlin, Uele coming off the bench. Rabbitohs don't have anyone. They're a bunch of haters. And yeah, not a whole lot to talk about here. Pretty boring there for the Sharks. Roosters versus Titans. Roosters have Joseph Manu starting at centre, Isaac Liu, Zane Teravano starting in the middle, and then you have Pawasa Fa'amasili and Satili Tupanuia coming off the bench. Titans have Kevin Proctor starting on an edge as always, and Moeaki Fotuaika coming off the bench as arguably the Titans' best player. Roosters, so no Siosoya Tokiaho and no Jared Wairea-Hargreaves. They are absent this week, and as I've talked about throughout the season, the Roosters do a great job of rotating their squad, bringing players in to gain experience and then build from there. And suddenly, at this stage of the season, no Tokiaho, no Wairea-Hargreaves, Isaac Liu starting at prop, Zane Teravano starting at prop, and the bench, like even outside of the Kiwi NRL players like Fa'amasili and Tupanuia, the Roosters bench also has Nat Butcher and Lindsay Collins, two young forwards. So that's 4 young forwards for the Roosters who have all gained plenty of experience throughout the course of the season. And this is when you start to see the rewards of that. In late season games, they have the confidence, the belief, and the experience to go out and do a job. And I can see the Roosters still defeating the Titans without Wairea-Hargreaves, without Tokiaho. Dragons versus Eels. Dragons are also full of haters. They got no one. Eels have Brad Takarangi making a move to wing. So the return of Michael Jennings and the arrival of Wanga Blake to play centre pushes Brad Takarangi out to the wing. Dylan Brown is in the halves. Manu Ma'u is on an edge, and the return of Sean Lane pushes Manata Niokore back to the bench. Penny Terapo is also lurking on an extended bench, as is Josh Hoffman. And just an interesting note here, Dylan Brown is also from Northland. So this week we have, as we do most weeks now with Dylan Brown coming back into the NRL, you got Adam Blair, he's from Northland. Corey Harawira-Naera is from Northland. James Fisher-Harris is from Northland. And you also have Dylan Brown, who is from Whangarei. So plenty of Northland Kiwi NRL contributions in the NRL. That's all for this week. We'll be back later in a couple of days, to wrap up the weekend's footy. Warriors versus Raiders Friday night, and then a couple of reserve grade games, couple of interesting little Kiwi NRL games. But this stage of the season, the games that you want to be watching are the games that feature teams sniffing around the top 8, because those are the desperation games. And then like Roosters versus Titans, Roosters will probably win that easy. Storm versus Broncos is going to be a great game this weekend. Seagulls versus Knights is going to be a great game as well. And Tigers versus Cowboys could be interesting just because those teams are a bit up and down throughout the whole season. That's it. We'll wrap it up there. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Enjoy the rugby league. Let us know where you're listening from, and cheer cheer.